Hello, welcome to the Content Strategy Collective with Market Muse. Today's session is how to maximize your agency relationship. My name is Britt Teravainen, and I have more than 15 years of digital marketing experience from roles within content marketing, demand and lead generation, social media, integrated media, and marketing technology. So essentially, my focus is all things digital. Today, I am the managing director of MarTech and Organic at Boathouse Group. Boathouse is a mid-sized full-service advertising agency outside of Boston. As we get into the presentation, I'll say a little bit more about that, but let's jump in and talk through our agenda. So today we're going to be covering a few different parts. The first will be talking through what an agency sells and delivers when it comes to SEO, how the power of data and metrics can be harnessed and made more actionable, how Market Muse has helped to evolve Boathouse's strategy with their clients, and actually how we deliver SEO for our clients. And then throughout this entire presentation, we'll be talking about how the context around everything we do will be how we best maximize either our relationship with our full service agency who handles SEO or any partner or outside vendor who is helping you deliver results for SEO. And when I say help you, that's sort of a really important starting point. So why don't we jump in? There's a lot to cover. So the first place to start is what are you doing and why? Why are you doing SEO? Most of my clients fall into two buckets. The first bucket is a bucket where they know that they need SEO. It's important for their site to perform, but it's not really necessarily connected to a why or how improving your site performance is going to drive your business or impact other marketing goals. The other bucket would be clients who do know a little bit more about SEO and they have a specific goal they're trying to achieve for their site. They have tied it to business goals, but they really just need executional help in getting their site and content to perform. But the why is incredibly important. And again, to the context of how to maximize that agency relationship, it is really critical to make sure that your agency understands the bigger business picture. So when you start a project or you're having dialogue, be sure to really cover the goals specifically so that you understand in the context of what you're doing for SEO, how that's going to drive performance. So for example, is your goal that you're trying to use your site to attract more qualified traffic that's going to power your sales funnel? Typically that's the goal. But again, how are we getting that connected? So we will talk more about the power of goals and how to connect that. But let's jump into the agency offering. Agencies are selling a lot of specific offerings related to SEO. There's a ton of different activities that go into it. But really, when it comes down to it, agencies are selling in two basic categories. There's a technical SEO category, and then there's a content and creative SEO category. And I'm going to get into detail about both of those, about how agencies are delivering those, what that process looks like, so that, again, you can understand going into a project what to expect, where you might want to focus, and hopefully this foundation will give you more fodder to have those strategic conversations with your agency to collectively push to get more performance, instead of it being more of sort of a one-off transaction where you're buying a service, an SEO service. And what you don't want is that agency to take your direction, go away into a black box, and come back with a bunch of data or recommendations that you're unable to activate on or unable to connect to a bigger picture. So let's start with technical SEO. I'll give you a quick example of what's in each bucket. So on the tech side, this is going to include your site performance and site structure. It's going to include foundational elements around performance. So, what is your CMS or content management system? How is that configured? What are your settings? What's in your website code? How fast is your site? What's the sitemap look like? Your URL structure, the metadata. And there's really two pieces to site performance and why it makes it important. There's usability. Users have a very limited attention span. And so from a site speed perspective, for example, Google has indicated that site speed is one of those signals used by its algorithm to rank pages. And so similarly, search engine crawlers have a limited amount of time that they can allocate to each site on the internet. So it's important that that site speed is fast so that Google can do its job to identify the content on your site. So the sites are loading quickly. And what we know is that sites that load quickly are crawled more thoroughly and more consistently than slower ones. So again, that's going to be important. So that's an example of site performance and some of the activity that would be under there. Site structure is also important. Many sites are lacking sound structure that help guide visitors to the information they're looking for. And that's going to also be a part of how you are ranked. So when Google's crawling your site to understand the content, that site structure is critical in telling Google or other search engines what's on your site and what matters so that they know what to serve to people who are searching for content that might be paid off by your site. So again, having a clear site structure is going to lead to a better understanding of your site by Google. So again, site performance, site structure, that's really the key pieces to technical SEO. And so this is a visual of that technical output. There are several tools out there that agencies may use that you might be using. Typically, the way these tools are going to work, they're not that expensive. You enter a domain, the tool will do a lot of the heavy lifting to show you sort of how your site is performing. Are there errors? Are there warnings? How many pages do you have? What's the site health? And there's a lot of different metrics that go into it. And I'm not going to do the SEO 101, but the point here is that these tools, from a technical perspective, can really do a lot of the heavy lifting. And so, yes, it's important that you understand what tools your agency is using, because I guarantee they're using them on your behalf, because it does a lot of the heavy lifting for agencies. And so where the agency or your partner should be adding value is really in interpreting these findings. Again, these tools are going to provide efficiency, but they are not necessarily going to tell you what to do with this data and how to improve your performance. I'll talk more about how this is leveraged when we get into delivery, but let me get into the second part of the agency SEO offering. So content. We talked about technical, now we're into content. Content is the backbone of SEO. So it's very connected to SEO offering. And I think, again, it's important to separate the two because there can be a lot of confusion. What is SEO? And a lot of people might think it's content, and a lot of people might just think it's technical. But it's not just good enough to fix the content on your site if it's not configured correctly through the technical aspect. And it's not good enough to just fix your site if your content is terrible and not ranking in a way that's driving your business performance. So in the content and creative bucket, it includes things like looking at the content on your site in the context of it. What's the content strategy that you need to deliver on? What are those goals? And so once you know what those goals are, and we'll talk more about how that's important when you're talking with your agency. But, you know, when you're looking into content SEO, it's looking at keywords. What's the copy? What are the topics? Are those topics that you're ranking for ones that you want to be ranking for? Are there gaps, etc.? What's the keywords? Do you have a keyword strategy? And if so, does your site reflect that? Do you know which keywords you want to rank for? And does your content contain those keywords in the right density with the right combination, etc.? Agencies are also selling sort of ongoing optimization and reporting related to both the technical and the content SEO bucket. But as we talk about delivery of these types of projects, we'll talk about how that fits in. But now that we've talked about quickly what's typically sold in, I think we're going to dive a little bit deeper into how these projects are set up, how agencies typically deliver, and again, why this is really important when you think about the context of managing expectations, managing that agency relationship, getting the most out of it. This is hopefully a good foundation for you to think about, okay, so I know what the foundation is of what goes into these types of projects. I know what I need to do as a marketer. Do I have my agency aligned in the right way to deliver on what I need to be doing to drive impact and connect my marketing, my SEO to drive the business? It's not one thing I'll also just pause and kind of quickly talk about is SEO isn't a silver bullet. SEO is not easy. It is organic, so there's no paid media necessarily tied to it, but there's typically costs associated with content creation, with staff, whether it's internal or through an agency partnership, that need to keep an eye on this. Google's changing its algorithm all the time. So on the technical side of things, things break, things need to be updated. So it's not just a set it and forget it. On the content side of things, there's always opportunities out there. And so you might sort of set your website up and it's perfect. You've got everything going in a really great optimized way, but are you just going to leave it like that? There's other content topics and formats that you might be able to use and get more qualified traffic into your sales funnel, onto your site to engage in a more meaningful way. And so, again, it's not easy. And so in my career, I've run into a lot of, I guess I'd call them hacks. It's not that I've worked with people who aren't skilled. It's really more from an agency standpoint. So as you know, marketers switch up their agencies all the time. At Boathouse, we pride ourselves in having sort of the longer than industry standard relationship. And I think I'll talk more about that as we talk about the Boathouse model and how we use Market Muse, but it doesn't matter. It's still a trend that agencies are switching over. And so, what I've seen in a specific example is that when we are transitioning or onboarding a new client, when they've used a previous partner, the first thing that we want to know is what was in that scope of work and how does that connect to what you're trying to achieve from a marketing standpoint? What were they delivering? And so it's just really been interesting to see on the delivery side of these things what clients been getting. A lot of times they've done a website refresh, they fixed some technical things, and then they're just running diagnostic reports and spitting out from Google Analytics, site metrics and a list of keywords. And the client would be frustrated in the past and they would have no idea what to do with that. And a lot of times on the marketing side, on the client side, there aren't necessarily people who are dedicated to SEO. They're more generalists. So they're not necessarily completely in tune with how to interpret that data and what to do. So they really need a partner that's not only going to give them the tools and execute for them, but to provide the consulting around how to maximize this information to drive performance. And that's really what you should be pushing your agency on. But let's get into, I don't want to harp on the negative, but my point is that there's a lot going into it. And if anyone really is suggesting otherwise, I would be sure that you ask your agency or partner for examples, prior deliverables, scopes of work. How are they measuring performance? Can they show case studies of where what they've done over time has actually improved things? Most legit agencies will be able to provide that. And most of those engagements are going to be structured into a few key phases that I will cover right now. But I think, let me just make sure I haven't skipped anything. Okay, so this is a screenshot going back to the content SEO. This is from an SEO tool that's rooted in driving performance through content optimization. Many of you will recognize this. It's Market Muse. In this screenshot, there's just an example of a few topics pulled from a site. And what's great about this when you're looking at content SEO, whether it's the initial optimization or it's over time, this lets you see sort of, here is a list of topics from that site. Here's how they're ranking on those currently. What's the topic authority? And, how difficult would it be for them to improve? And then also what's the associated value with owning that topic? And I'll get into that when I talk about the the reason why Boathouse is using Market Muse, and because that's a core part of why we like it. There's assigned value to the work that's monetary versus sort of arbitrary performance metrics. More on that soon, but let's get into delivery against the two categories. So again, two categories of SEO. There's technical and content. You need both. You can't have one without the other. So there's most agencies, including Boathouse, structures their engagements into a few key phases. The first is going to be the audit. This is where your agency is going to get the lay of the land to understand how your site is performing from a technical and content standpoint. In some cases, you might be launching a new site, so the audit might be of the current site, and that could be a key input into what you want to bring forward into your new site so that you're sure to configure it differently in a way that's going to already, when you launch that new site, help you let Google know what you care about, what's on your site, so more people who you want to find it will find it. The other thing is in the audit, you'll be able to, and we'll go into exactly what I mean for technical and content, but on the content side, you will inventory all the content and you'll kind of understand, are there opportunities there? Is there content that's not really performing that we want to kill and not really focus on in the future? Where do we want to focus our efforts moving forward? So let's get specific. Technical SEO. So again, what's involved here in the audit phase? Technical SEO is going to set up your site for search engine success. Again, your site needs to comply with SEO best practices and web standards in order to sustain and attract traffic. As you're optimizing various components of your site, you're essentially positioning the site not to be penalized by search engines. And so after your site's technical SEO is in a good place, you can begin to sort of reap those benefits and really include SEO in a full digital marketing strategy. So on the technical side of the audit, that's going to entail checking the following pieces. There's more to it, but this is high level. You're going to look at your metadata. You're going to look at your sitemap, your robots TXT file. You're going to want to look at the URL structure. As you know, a well-crafted URL will provide both humans and search engines with an easy to understand indication of what is actually on that destination page and what it will be about. URLs are also a minor ranking factor. So search engines are going to use that to determine a particular page or the relevance of the resource on that page to someone and what they're searching. And so, while they do give weight to the overall domain itself, keywords, they can act as that factor. So there's some other things quickly. Keyword density, there's a balance there, which we'll get into. What are your browser title and heading tags, your file name, optimization, image scaling, media files, are they the right size? That all is going to go into sort of that site performance, that page speed, the load time, the user experience. So in terms of the audit, there's several tools that are used, like I said, but let me just quickly cover what's in these images if you can read them. There's 3 screenshots here. One is the sitemap. That is sort of every single page, the navigation, what ladders up to what. And the other is the sitemap code. And the other is the robots TXT file. So the robots TXT is just a simple text file that's placed on your site's root directory. This file is going to contain instructions that are going to tell search engines what to crawl, what not to crawl on your site. And you have to make sure that this is in your sitemap for optimal performance so that Google can effectively crawl and rank the content on your site. So this is just an example of you would want to make sure as part of this audit to check to make sure everything is configured correctly, again, so that Google and other search engines understand the intention behind the content in the pages of your site. Moving on to content. So what's involved in the content audit? Like I said, the content is the backbone of your SE's. Ideal content pages should be very specific given a topic and be hyper relevant. So again, people are searching specific keywords. When they click on the result related to that keyword, it needs to be relevant throughout the entire experience, from keyword to search engine page result to your landing page. So it's important that you are organizing your content in a clear and logical way from highest to lowest priority. That can be done through different headings and call outs, calls to action. Those are prioritized based on what we want users to do in the end. But in terms of the audit piece, typically there's going to be an inventory of all the site content to better understand what's on the site and what people are navigating to, what people are engaging with. Typically depends, is it a full site inventory? That's going to depend on the size of the site and the scope of the project. As you know, some websites can have thousands and thousands of pages and content. So if if the site is that large, your agency might only audit the top 25 to 50 to 100 pages as input, which is totally normal and can still yield the same type of findings. You're going to be looking at the types of content on the site and the resulting performance of those. There's a ton of different metrics around content, top ranking pages, content type, traffic volume, sources to the page, visit metrics like how many pages per session, or what's the bounce rate, what's the new versus you returning visitors. And what agencies need from you as the client is an understanding of what your content strategy is, so that when they do the audit, they have a filter. So they're going to want to know and want to ask. And if they're not asking, that's maybe an issue, but you can provide this information so that they can be more successful on your behalf. What are the narratives? What are the themes? What are the topics that your business wants to be known for? You'd be surprised how many people don't have a content strategy and they get involved in SEO. A good agency is going to ask you those questions so that the audit that they're doing has that strategic business filter. My experience, if the conversation about content strategy is not happening, or if you as the client don't have one, the SEO audit isn't going to be as meaningful. So if you don't have a content strategy, what you're going to get is sort of a baseline. It's not that it's necessarily bad, but it's going to provide you with the status quo performance of your site. Again, it's still valuable, but if that content strategy conversation happens, that's going to help in a much better way. The person running the audit will have that as a filter to understand, here's what you have, but that's not lining up to what you need. So it's going to help identify gaps, areas of focus, not just to improve the site, but to align with the business strategy. Coming out of the audit, there would be a set of recommendations in both buckets. Recommendations to improve both the technical aspect of your website and the content on your site, all in the goal of improving performance. The way that typically works is the audit findings document can be pretty lengthy, lots of information that would be delivered and discussed with you, the client. There'd be several recommendations that would come out of that, quick fixes, but it's critical for you to understand what's being recommended, why it's important, and again, how it's going to drive performance. Because when you get into implementation, there can be additional costs associated, whether it's internal resources or agency, in terms of implementation. And typically, before you do the audit, you don't have a really good sense of how much is going to go into that implementation. So one of the things you might want to think about to maximize the relationship is to really think about even scoping it in different phases, where you do the audit and maybe you have a bucket or a range for implementation, but you really work closely with your agency to prioritize what's being implemented and when. So again, what's involved, short and long-term recommendations, but again, discussing the why behind the recommendation and the how it will be executed should really help you increase performance. So let me give you an example. Here is a report out, a lot of copy here, but it provides clear context. What is the audit area? It's title tags in this case. What is a title tag? It's a little description. This is super helpful because, again, not everybody on your team is going to be an SEO expert. You may also need to bring these recommendations and make a case for why SEO to others in your organization. So making sure that your agency is aware of the different the different stakeholders that you have when they're preparing these recommendations. Is this for somebody who knows the in the weeds SEO tech language? They're very familiar. Great. Or is this somebody who's a general marketer who definitely understands the benefit of SEO, but they don't know all of this? So this is an example of the latter. Just a little bit more information about what the title tags are, why they're important, so that you understand in the context of the recommendation and the finding why we're doing this. So in this case, the findings was that the page titles were not using an optimal format for most pages. Some pages had duplicate title tags, and we know that each title must be unique. In this case, there was duplicates for blog categories and tags, case studies, success stories, blog posts, and press releases. So the recommendation was to obviously update all of the page title tags to the right format, making sure they were all unique for each page, and then some more specifics around how to handle the duplicate content situation. And so again, this is what you want. Maybe not in this format, but the idea of this. Again, what it is, context for why, the findings, the recommendations, and even, what's not on this slide, which would be very helpful, is maybe timing around what would be needed to get this done. The reason that sometimes it's not included here is because, to my earlier point about having a conversation where you, with your agency, prioritize, there might be some efficiencies to doing a bunch of these different things all at the same time. So it's hard to sometimes go by area how long it will actually take. And the other piece would be sometimes, in my experience, clients have people who can implement, they just need some hand-holding. So this type of thing would provide specific hand-holding for an internal resource to take this on. So the initial implementation is designed to get your website fixed or set up correctly to improve performance. And typically, clients are going to see, you're going to see as a marketer some pretty good performance improvement right after implementing the initial recommendations. As you know, it's not a sort of flip the switch. Google needs time to crawl and rank, etc. But again, that initial implementation of those recommendations, that's great. But the work really doesn't stop there, and it shouldn't. Again, depending on budgets, sometimes I see that clients do that and then they stop paying attention. And that's not really going to help your investment with that agency go further. SEO is not set it and forget it. There are monthly activities that should be part of someone's job, either internally, and if not, the agency should be recommending this ongoing work because they should know that things you're going to have to be checking up on this. So what would be part of a monthly activity type of delivery? You're going to look at audience, UX, content, tech, and have some optimization meetings. So on the audience side, you'll review and report out on how different demographic groups are interacting with the site currently. You might be using other tools. Your agency might be using them, Google Analytics, there's Search Console, SEMrush, Hotjar, really depending on what you have. You will want to keep looking and reviewing the navigation paths so you see where people are dropping off. Maybe there's changes that you can be making in both desktop and mobile environments to improve that experience. So then again, you're improving that bounce rate and Google seeing that, which makes you more relevant and more likely to rank higher. From a content perspective, again, that's based on that content strategy for the organization. Let's report out on the rankings based on what we're trying to achieve and provide those content and keyword optimizations, not just content keyword optimizations. Yes, there's that, but what other content and topics should we be focusing on? Where are the gaps? That's where Market Muse, the inventory planning and competitive tools, that's what we use. It's really helpful there to think about what those recommendations are. And I'll talk more about the model for how that's efficient with Market Muse, but essentially you use Market Muse to identify those opportunities, and either your team as the marketer or your agency's team is taking the output from Market Muse, which are the content briefs that sort of help writers optimize that content for better performance. And then someone writes it with data-driven insights. You're also going to want to keep an eye on the tech, the site speed. Depending on the size of your organization, you might have a lot of people that are going in and making updates in the CMS. So you want to make sure that none of those updates are providing or causing SEO related issues. Are people updating optimized image files, or are they putting big files on the site that is going to really affect site speed? So we do site speed checks. Your agency should do that. It's really just the health of your site, and then calling out suggested fixes every single month. Some months may have a lot of things that are identified, and that's why it's important to be patient here. But what really needs to happen with your agency every single month is to have face-to-face or virtual, now that we're in this world, insight and optimization meetings where you go over all these findings. You're looking at real-time data. You're speaking with your strategists and your analysts just doesn't have to be a long thing, a 30 to 60 minute monthly meeting where you can review those insights when they're available and actionable. You're looking at the metrics and to understand how to connect the dots. Ideally, you have people on the phone that aren't just focused on the SEO performance. They really know the entire holistic picture of your digital marketing performance. So you can think about different opportunities to use SEO. One example would be connecting SEO to paid search. A lot of times those are in silos, and that's not great. As my agency tries to connect those as much as possible, because what we know is that you can get a lot of wins with SEO. You can rank high on certain topics. There may be things that you can own just based on who your brand is and what you stand for. And so you want to make sure that if you're winning on SEO, you're not paying to win on those same keywords in terms with paid search. You'd like to focus the paid search dollars on areas where you're not winning organically, so that when people are searching, you're either showing up in a prominent location on paid or organic or both, depending on your strategy. But those things need to be connected, and making sure you're checking in on that performance of SEO monthly is going to help you find opportunities for you to be more efficient with your paid media spend potentially. Or it's just going to help focus your internal content efforts as well. So now let's segue into the power of data and metrics. I've kind of talked a little bit about making sure things are actionable, but it's really important to monitor performance over time, not just for the sake of monitoring metrics to say that you're keeping an eye on it. Reporting really requires strategic setup so that from the get-go, you're identifying the key metrics that you're going to look at. Like I said, tons of metrics. Go into Google Analytics right now, look at the site metrics, hundreds of metrics. Which ones are those metrics that are going to allow you to take real action, whether that's fixing a redirect issue or fixing site speed, or what are the metrics that are going to tell you that there's technical site performance issues? Or on the content side, what are the metrics that are going to let you know what content is ranking so that you know how to focus or improve your efforts? Do you produce more of the content that's driving engagement, or more content that's driving site conversion? Do you even have insight into which pieces of content are doing that? It really, again, depends on that content strategy. But the key point is that you need actionable insights. If you're getting a report that just has a bunch of numbers and a spit out, challenge that agency. What does this mean? How is it going to help me improve? What am I specifically going to do about that? That used to be one of my biggest pet peeves when prior to joining the agency side, I was on the client side. And so I don't want to just get a bunch of numbers. I need insights. I need recommendations. So again, challenge your agency. There's a lot of things out there that give you that quick dashboard. Great dashboard. Looks fantastic. What does that mean for me? What am I going to do with this data? Again, agencies that's really the value that they should be adding in addition to execution. So let's do a quick recap. So far, we've covered the following: why SEO, what are you doing, getting your goals, what agencies are typically offering and delivering, how those are structured, the power of analytics and reporting, and how you should be challenging your agency there. But along the way, we've talked about specific things that you can do to maximize that agency relationship. So let's just quickly read this list so that we're covering it. We want to align on the goals, the why, and the intent. Don't set it and forget it. Yes, do those initial audits and implementation projects, but continue to monitor and look for opportunities. Make sure you're connecting organic and paid search. Go beyond just straight measurement. It's not good enough. You need actionable insights, and have a performance mindset and filter, and make sure your agency does too. Again, that kind of goes back to the goal alignment and the why and the intent behind the project. But it really shouldn't be this quick handoff. It should be ongoing curiosity around how to keep moving. So again, let's keep going because I want to get into the next part of the presentation, which is our model. So I've been talking a lot about agencies in general and SEO in general, but I want to spend our final minutes talking about the evolution of Boathouse's SEO model. We're always evolving. I'm sure we'll continue to evolve, but how currently our SEO model, how Market Muse has helped how we think about adding value to our clients. So I don't want to do a sales pitch. This isn't what this is about, but I do think I need to give you 2 minutes on Boathouse. Again, not as a sales pitch, but because the DNA of who we are has driven part of our decision-making in how on selecting Market Muse as a core part of our SEO offering. So I'll get to the model quickly, I promise, but quickly, again, I'm not going to bore you with this whole slide. There's a whole story behind the agency, but what really matters is the DNA of our agency and the people who work here and how the background of our founders and their experience rowing. Not sure if anyone who's listening is a rower, but it's a completely different sport where it's really about team, and their experience really shaped the values around who we are and how we solve problems for our clients, really about being ROI focused. Even if it's an awareness goal, how is that driving a return on investment? Team minded. We're not in silos. I'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of departments. It's about collaboration. We've just switched to agile. So how can we bring the right people on the right team to deliver? We need smart people who are nimble. Everything is changing in the industry, the agency side of things. It's getting really busy, and you got to stay at the top of your game to be competitive. You need to be nimble because things are changing all the time. You as marketers know that's happening to you. So as your agency partner, we got to stay nimble too, so we can be quicker, more agile. We need to be relentless, curious, and help ideate. Or else you're going to sort of kick us out and not be our partner. And so that's something that we bring. We're going to ask questions. We're going to push in a really positive way with you after we sort of align on what those strategies are, so that we can link strategy to execution and then really look at the data so that we understand what are the different data sources that are driving everything that we do. Our client mix, we don't need to spend a lot of time here, just matches our regional economy, healthcare, higher ed, pharma, energy, and financial, among others, both B2B and B2C. But what's important here is because of this industry mix, we have complex marketing problems to solve for the way we shape a brand's narrative, whether it's shaping the brand's narrative or how we acquire customers or engage audiences. These aren't easy categories. So we have to be really smart about how we bring our different services to bear. And what makes us unique? We're a full service agency. We offer a lot of the same in-house expertise that every other agency might do. But what makes us unique is not what our departments are, but how we connect the dots. We embrace cross-functional collaboration and optimization across the marketing portfolio. We're breaking those silos down along the way so that all areas of execution are focused on the client and their goals, focusing on the metrics that matter, so that when we really just understand what combination of tactics to bring, whether it's traditional, digital, social, content, SEO, to achieve those goals. Great. So that's Boathouse. I promised it was going to be quick. Again, the DNA is important, and you'll see soon why. Why Market Muse? So now that you know a little bit about Boathouse, you'll understand why we chose Market Muse to be core to our strategy. So The first reason is the Boathouse client mix. As you saw, complex categories, but it's also about our clients. Many of our clients have, they produce content. They have thought leadership. They have content that's really driving key parts of their strategy. It's important that they own and build narratives in the marketplace so that they have the right perception, the right awareness, so that they can attract the right customer and have competitive advantage. So while SEO is all about site performance, for our clients, it's really important to support the content strategy. And we use Market Muse at the core of that. We use other tools like SEMrush and Moz, et cetera, but Market Muse adds that layer of content strategy and intelligence that's helping our creative teams, our SEO teams, and even our clients team craft that content-driven customer journey that's going to turn people who come to your site into actual buyers. Our client mix, they have that performance focus too. They're publishers, thought leaders. They care about lead generation. The last part of it is budgets. So these aren't big consumer companies with giant $1 million budgets. Most of our clients have modest budgets, so they can't always be competitive. And so that's part of the reason they come to a full service agency that can do everything for them. That saves them money. But from a paid perspective, they can't always be competitive in the paid space. So it's critical for them to have an organic presence that has good SEO. That's critical for them. So my team is using those tools like Market Muse to help them find that white space where they can be more competitive, own specific topics where maybe the competition isn't as high. That's still going to drive qualified traffic to their site and power the sales funnel. But on the flip side, again, using Market Muse to have more of a holistic search strategy where we can use the competitive intel to tell us where we should focus our budget and not spend from a paid perspective, because we can win easily and rank well organically. So that's definitely a big part of why. The other thing about the offering, which is helpful for us, is that it's actually recommendations, like specific recommendations. Write about this topic in this way. So it's going beyond telling me that there's keywords that I need to include. I can do that with lots of tools and figure out what keywords map to the content I like. It's answering questions about what we should write about, how much should we write about it, and how to do that. And it also then has workflows. And again, I'm not going to sell Market Muse here, but it's part of the model that we have put into place. It's faster. We can show better progress. It's powered by, the AI technology and data. It's automating that content audit side of things. It's really crawling all of the pages instead of saying, I'm only going to look at the top 25 pages. It's everything. And it's bringing to bear that information that helps us analyze and audit, not focus on pulling together the inventory or spending a lot of time on the activity. So that allows us, when we're charging clients, to actually charge for the meaningful, high value stuff versus pulling together and running tools that the clients can actually run. So that's helpful. The other piece around ROI that I like about Market Muse, and you may know this if you guys are users and customers, so you know that there's an ability to assign that value to SEO. And so one of the biggest issues that I had in terms of trying to think about the Boathouse SEO offering was, how do you sell the value of SEO work? How do you quantify that? And when I saw Market Muse, I was like, oh, okay, great. I can quantify this. I can work with my clients to assign actual dollar figures associated with SEO. And so that's what those screenshots are. When you are looking at the traffic value that you see in the dashboard, you can actually modify this to adjust your ROI. So this is just one example of if you had information about the value of the lead on a site, you can plug that in. You can put in some historical figures, the conversion rates that you want, and then that will show you, once you have input what matters to you. If it's lead generation, it can also just be cost per click or things that are more higher funnel. You put that in, and now I can say, if you do this to your site, you will expect to get this type of improvement, which will translate into this type of dollars, because we expect, based on the current conversion rate, the improvement to that conversion rate, that we're going to see this type of value being generated from the site. That's powerful. And I haven't seen a lot of people, agencies, when I'm on the client side, being able to show you how much money you would actually generate from a business perspective. So our model is pretty simple. We use Market Muse to power our content and creative recommendations. We are focusing on strategy and performance. Again, from the Market Muse side of things, powering that recommendation on the content side. We use it to audit, analyze, generate, and optimize. We also are leveraging top technical site audit tools like SEMrush and Moz. We're keeping costs low because we have a model where, depending on what we need to do, we use a mix of internal and external resources to execute. So everything content and creative and audit and recommendations and implementation recommendations are on our site. We can do all the content implementations. The technical side of things, we actually do bring in some external resources to keep costs low. Based on our model at the agency, we just bring in, we have a sort of pool of people that we need to bring in, and that's part of the project. What we're finding is that we need that type of flexibility in our model because we, as an agency, know that a lot of our clients have talent inside. They're bringing things in-house. They have IT teams and developers that can do that technical site fix. They have content teams that can actually write, but what they need is to have the strategy, have the direction for what to do to improve, and have the ongoing analysis to see what's working, what's not, and to show the value of what's happening. And so again, we want to have this flexible model that we can sort of plug and play where clients want to bring ongoing work in-house for them, or they want to continue to leverage our agency. And the final thing in terms of our model is holistic reporting. Again, in a lot of cases, we're doing more than SEO for our clients. So SEO is just a piece of it. So we want to make sure from a reporting standpoint that SEO is prominent where it makes sense as a layer in holistic reporting. And if we're only doing SEO for a client, we certainly want to make sure the conversations are happening around everything so that we can kind of see impact and look for ways to shift and optimize between paid and organic so that you as the client are saving money. So again, simple model, outperform. These are the things that we're doing to help make that happen. And I think at this point, that wraps up my presentation. Thank you so much for the time and the opportunity to speak to you today. I hope that you walked away with a lot of information, but more importantly, thinking about how you can better maximize your agency relationship. You have some of that foundational insider information about how things are structured, what you should be asking, where you should be focusing those efforts so that you're really getting the best performance and bang for your buck. You're paying your agency. Let's make sure that you're getting what you need out of them. And so on the screen, just before I sign off, you can see that my contact information is there. That's my work email. Please reach out if you have any feedback or questions for me. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, but thank you again. Enjoy the rest of the amazing content at this year's Content Strategy Collective with Market Muse, and be well. Take care. Thank you.